Welcome everybody back here at Veil of Sound with a little special for us. No, not our regular Sunday interview, but we had the chance to talk to two guys who play in one band, but we want to talk about their side projects. So I'm very thankful for having Aaron and Jordan from, well, Together Falls of Rauros here on the show. Thanks for joining, guys.
Thanks for having
Thank you.
us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Our pleasure here, and we first have to clue it up. We want to talk about Aaron's project Rhûn and Jordan's other band Forêt Endormie. And it's very interesting, and I was very happy that we could do this because both projects are, I don't want to say as unlike as possible, but they're very far from each other. And that is something that I really, really like. And furthermore, one thing that I like about this one here is that both guys agreed to do something that we haven't done in a long, long while. Musicians interviewing each other and me just being kind of a host. I always like that one. But before we start, guys, I also have one question. And it's funny because a few days ago, I asked Dylan from Bellwitch a very similar question. You are playing in Falls of Rauros together, and then you have those other two projects, which are, especially with Forêt Endormie, very unlike Falls. Do you think that that is also important and necessary for Falls of Rauros itself?
Interesting. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure.
Cool.
Yeah, with Rhûn, I mean, it's a much newer project. Yeah, I recorded that music 2.5 years ago, but it was just kind of a one and done at the time. I think in a way, it did help kind of get some ideas out that were maybe a bit less thoughtful, maybe a bit more just kind of improvised and crude, maybe. It helped me keep that out of Falls, which is nice. And I think that's going to be one of the main functions of the project going forward, is just sort of helping maintain the the Falls sound without letting too much stuff contaminate it if I'm just feeling like I want to get some stuff out of my system. Yeah. So it helped me in that way. It's probably even more so for Jordan.
Yeah. So for me, I think both Aaron and I have a lot of musical interests, and like Falls is a relatively unique band in the genre in that we do like put a lot of different, it's not orthodox black metal, right? It's like very sort of expansive as far as whatever subgenre of black metal we are. But yeah, I studied music in school and like really wanted to have a focused place to write in sort of the classical tradition. So that is like writing sheet music out and giving it to performers. And that can be really challenging. I think the traditional model is you're a composer and then you hope that groups will perform your music. So I wanted to have a set group that I wrote for. So I started that in late 2016. And the lineup has shifted over time. We've done 3 full lengths and an EP. But I feel like I've learned a lot writing for sort of a set group, even if it is evolving. Like I'm getting a lot better at writing for strings. And as far as it relates to Falls, even though they're very different projects, like Rhûn and Forêt Endormie, I think like the answer is similar, is I can kind of explore these things. And then some of what I learned by doing Forêt Endormie, I bring back to Falls, and other things it's like, that won't necessarily work. So, and yeah, it allows me to explore a sort of different workflow of writing for an ensemble too. So yeah, I think it helps us like really focus on Falls identity by having these other places.
Yeah, it helps you not to water out the gist of Falls, right? It keeps Falls what it was supposed right from the beginning. I can imagine that. Speaking about that, of course, I have to ask. I know that a lot of people will be clicking on this video just because of the mentioning of Falls of Rauros in the title. I have to ask, like, what about new music? When can we expect new sounds from the Falls?
We are currently writing a new record, but we're taking our time. I mean, between other projects, that definitely slows things down a bit. And then we're not a career band, so we all have jobs.
I thought this would be like your living, right?
Oh no,
not even close.
Not even close.
Okay, I believed you. Oh, that's funny.
Yeah,
nice.
Yeah, so between all of our commitments, Ray, our drummer, and we both play live with Panopticon, which is some amount of touring a year plus rehearsing and all that. So there's just so much going on.
And
we don't want to rush it.
Yeah, and Falls of Rauros is playing in Europe. Oh, well, some of that has been announced. But yeah, we're playing the Fortress Festival and maybe some other stuff. We'll see. So that
I've already seen that lineup for Fortress, and
yeah, and
it's hard to resist.
So we only have. I know it's gonna be really fun. But we only have so much time to work on the band, so like it either goes into rehearsing or writing. So if we're doing live stuff, we have to rehearse. So it's kind of that, but I don't know. Yeah, we are writing. I could see something in the next couple years. That's safe to say. Yeah.
Aaron, just one last question before you can then fire away with your first question for Jordan. You say you're playing with Panopticon. Are you only playing with Austin live, or are you also involved in the recording of, for example, the new record, which is awesome? I love the new record.
It's a great record. Yeah. Just live. With his studio records, Austin does almost everything. He does kind of have a cast of collaborators, but it's people that do things that he can't do. Like fiddle. He gets a bunch of people to do choir vocals and stuff like that.
Strings and stuff.
Yeah. Whereas like I could contribute guitar. He can play guitar, things like I could do vocals, but it's just live. But that's it's very fun, and he considers the live lineup kind of like a different entity almost. So we change the songs a bit. The arrangements are different. So he lets people kind of come up with their own parts for the live show. It doesn't have to be exactly what he played. So I guess there's a bit of a creative contribution there.
Yeah. I was just thinking because I've when I reviewed the record, it struck me how many people were involved in that record. I mean, like there were more people involved than I would have imagined. Like 10 to 12 people outside of Austin. But yeah. Okay, so Aaron, I told you guys, like each of you comes up with 3 or 4 questions for the other one. Best is if it's always a little connected to the specific project. So your first question for Jordan.
All right.
And I will keep a tab on who has who many questions.
Okay. I'll keep it casual. So when you're writing by yourself, how do you you have like a method for how you start a composition? Obviously with Falls, it kind of changes a lot from song to song, how we start a particular song. But yeah, do you have like a workflow of, maybe a seed, or like something you hear in your head, or do you start notating immediately?
Yeah. So over time it's flipped a bit as to whether I start in a DAW or in a notation software, or start with guitar. So Falls, I think almost always we start with guitar riffs. With Forêt Endormie, like I would say 20% of the time that's the case. And yeah, usually it starts with either some sort of improvisation and honing it in, or I might have had some melody left over from something else that I want to build into a piece of music. And then usually I do write out the arrangement as I go. So I know some composers like do a piano reduction or whatever, and they write the whole piece that way and then orchestrate it. I usually sort of I'm writing it out for all the instruments as I go. And then, yeah, try to do a lot of, I try to not just write from beginning to end. It's like jumping around and tying things together and stuff like that. But I would say most commonly I'm working in notation. So in the past, it's been finale. Yeah, that helps because I'm going to end up giving sheet music to all the musicians. So it's nice to like write it there. And but for the last record, I also made demos in Cubase with sampled instruments. So I was kind of bouncing between the two, and they both have strengths and weaknesses as far as workflow and like sort of the realism of the sounds versus how easy it is to put stuff in. So I would kind of bounce back and forth, which I want to streamline that for the next record. Because sometimes it was like double or triple the amount of work. But yeah. Yeah.
So
Awesome.
Jordan, your first one.
Yeah. Cool. Cool. So I'll start with a question about production. Contrary to, well, actually back in the day, we self-produced Falls records, but I know that for this record, the Rhûn record, you self-produced it all the way to the end, I think, including mastering. So can you talk a little bit about that? Both like how it felt and then like confidence wise as someone who doesn't do it for a living. And then also like what some of the tools that you used. So both like philosophical and tech.
Okay. Yeah, it was definitely enjoyable to self-produce. I actually really liked it. And that's one of the things I'm most excited about going forward. Yeah, it wasn't too scary for a few reasons. Like for one, it was a new project that there's no expectations or fan base. There's no one to disappoint if it
Yeah, because
sounds
Falls
bad
has no
or
fan base
is
at
bad.
all, so nobody has pressure. I know.
Exactly.
Right.
So yeah, just having like the different moniker, like, the different pseudonym to go under took off a lot of that pressure. And then in terms of the production, yeah, I mean, I recorded it all just at my apartment. And yeah, basically just kind of coming up with ideas and recording them and then editing if I had to quickly. But just all just, apartment style, quiet amps or just plugging direct in. I grabbed my pedal board for some effects and stuff, but yeah, just all into Reaper was the DAW I used, and I just kind of looked up some tutorials on how to mix and used intuition, mostly just used my ear. And there was a couple crutches. Like, I mean, for one, the genre like can be rough sounding and it's often preferred. It's that's what people want to hear. So it's not like I had to make it super professional sounding. And the original idea for the project was that it was going to be really raw. So it actually turned out a lot less raw than I was envisioning. I expected it to be like just like terrible sounding, and I wanted it to be terrible sounding. And then I put in some effort, and it sounds like medium fi, but it's certainly not a pro sounding record. And I mean, like the drums, Ray, the Falls drummer, did session drums for it, and He just tracked that himself, did a rough mix himself, and then just sent me a single audio file, and I just used that. So there was no meticulous like drum editing or drum production. So it's pretty live room sound for the drums, which is cool. But it was fun. I think I'll probably try harder next time, which could be either good or bad, you know. Production wise, just try to like find areas for improvement, but maybe that'll ruin it.
Yeah.
Jordan,
Tough to know.
if I may jump
Thanks.
in here, I have a question
Yeah.
because Aaron just said that you would like to try harder. In which direction? More lo-fi or more elaborate?
I guess I'm thinking more elaborate, or at least, you know, everything was very instinctual with the first record. So just kind of improvised something quickly, decide if I like it right then and there, record it, keep it, and move on. And then mixing was kind of like that too. It was just sort of find some sounds, get levels, and just kind of let it be. Whereas, you know, like a pro production is going to have a lot of like volume automation riding, you know, bringing up a drum fill, tucking something under, so like, you know, some other layer or like lead can poke out on top of the mix. Just a lot of that sort of subtlety. I didn't do any of that. It was just like a static mix. Basically, things come in and it's loud. And so I would probably do more volume riding and just try to make it a bit more dynamic. But I have limitations. I mean, if I do it myself, there's no way it's going to sound overproduced. I don't think that's possible.
So then I have a question for both of you that I forgot to ask at the beginning. Shirt of the day. You know, what are you guys wearing today? What are you representing?
Yeah, I'm wearing an Obsidian Tongue long sleeve. Obsidian Tongue is an awesome, I guess, like psychedelic, atmospheric black metal band from here, originally from Massachusetts, which is a couple hours south of where we live in Portland, Maine. So yeah, it's our friend Brendan, and then we've talked about him a lot, but Ray, the Falls drummer, plays drums for Obsidian Tongue, and more newly, they have a bassist, live at least, Brian Tennyson. And yeah, they just released a new
Brian
EP,
Tennyson,
The
isn't that the guy
Stoneheart.
for Eve?
It is, yeah. Good memory. Yeah, he's playing with Obsidian Tongue now. So yeah, nice. Yeah, he's great. And their new EP is again called The Stoneheart. It's really good. It sounds great, super like exploratory. I don't know. Brendan is a really great musician and composer. So I recommend it to anybody that likes this sort of stuff that we're talking about. It's really good. Yeah.
Agreed.
You will also find a review of that EP soon on the Veil of Sound. And if you want to know a little bit more about Brian Tennyson and his project or his other band, Eve, you just have to go a few months back. I think we had an interview with him in August, something like that. So you will get even more info on that. And Aaron, what are you repping today?
I got my Aura Noir tank top. So I just love those guys. I mean, I don't know them personally. I don't have that connection like we do with Obsidian Tongue, but it's just classic, like blackened heavy metal thrash stuff. It's just so fun. And yeah, I mean, everything they do has been great. They apparently are a band again after a few years of being broken up. So hopefully they put out a record soon.
Definitely. That would also be something that I would be checking out. Yes. I remember the last one they did. That was already several years ago, wasn't it?
I think it was like 2018 or something.
Yeah, was it like definitely pre-pandemic? Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but also a great project. Before anybody asks, I'm representing Orange County Fries. Just something casual for the day, but it's a band that I grew up with.
Excellent.
One of the first hardcore shows that I cried, but they're just really good. It's a really cool band. Yeah, there is something in the sound of Riley. I was happy to see them a few times, and there is something about that the artist in the ambulance, which reminds me of something that nearly happened to me. So it was like, okay, it brought back memories from an ambulance. So yeah. Nevertheless,
I know that
you go on.
Yeah, I think both of us listened to that record a lot back in the day when it came out.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
2003 or something, 4 maybe.
Something like that, yes. Now it's I would say everything up to the Alchemy Index is spun here at home like once a month minimum, including the Alchemy Index, which is a great record in itself, and the Earth side of it is probably one of the best collection of 5 or 6 songs that I've ever listened to. Also including the cover that is on it and all that stuff. So yeah, it's a really great record. So
cool. I
Aaron,
haven't heard that. That's cool.
You've never heard that?
No, I haven't listened to that record, but
Same.
It's a good recommendation. So
it's like it's very folksy, you know. Earth, of course, it's like dark Americana, and I'm thinking if it's a cover of a Frodo's record or if it's mine. It must be Frodo's, and they covered that on that record, and it's really awesome. They turned it totally into their own, and it's got this, you know, like Johnny Cash American Recordings vibe, which is really, really cool. I like that.
Yeah, nice.
So Aaron, your next one.
All right. I guess to piggyback on the first question about, like, you know, starting your process, do you normally start from like a melodic or a rhythmic idea, or do you start with like a mood, like, or just like a concept that you want to write for? Like, what's like the first sort of seed that gets you started on a piece?
Yeah, I think it depends also. If I've decided that I'm like full writing a record, then I'm sort of going with concepts, but the concepts don't necessarily need to be like extra musical. Like it doesn't need to be some kind of you know, philosophical concept. It can be like I'm trying to balance the record out with something more chill or something, to use a more like an oversimplified thing. I also usually am generating a list of musical ideas and like maybe rhythmic ideas or melodic ideas or instrument pairings that I want to experiment with. So I might pull those out at the same time, which is kind of like a technical thing, but I find that it's like, oh, I've never written for, you know, clarinet and bass playing a duet before. So maybe I'll experiment with that, at least for a section. And that is a good way to keep things fresh. But yeah, I think it depends. At the very beginning, I think I have some ideas, but I'm just sketching, and I will often write like, you know, 20 measures of something and like put it away for a little while and do some other sketches and then sort of see where I'm headed naturally. And then it tends to there's always sort of extra musical themes with what I do too. So, and that sort of tends to be whatever I'm reading and thinking about at the time, and the music and lyrics and stuff sort of all eventually end up on track together. But yeah, it varies. Yeah.
Makes sense.
interesting to hear that you sometimes approach it from a really technical point of view. You know, like as you said, clarinet and bass.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that could sound very like academic, but also if you think about it a different way, is like, oh, I've never expressed myself this way. And one of the things that's, I mean, I love metal, obviously, but one of the things that's pretty limiting is the instrumentation, the core instrumentation. Like you can have expanded metal, but there's probably going to be drums and guitar, right? And probably bass, and all of those things are going to more or less be playing from the beginning of the song to the end of the song, right? But with other styles of music, like there's a lot more to experiment with instrumentation wise. So yeah, anyway.
How do you decide? I mean, is it just, maybe you kind of already answered this, but how do you decide what instruments, when you're writing a part,
Yeah.
it's like, do you have the instrument in mind before you even start writing the part, or do you write like the melody and whatever and then assign it an instrument?
Sometimes I would say that is something that I am learning over time. Like that's a sort of endless other path of music is so multifaceted, and there's so many disciplines, sub-disciplines, right? One of them is orchestration or arranging or whatever. And I do have an amazing opportunity to keep writing for the same instruments, and in some cases the same players over and over again. So, and they give me feedback of like what's easy on the instrument and what's really hard. And sometimes I write something that's impossible, which is like a little bit embarrassing, and then we have to rework it. But yeah, a lot of times, like if I'm writing a really lyrical line, I can like hear how our violinist would play it or something, or so I'll just like, that's going to sound great on violin. And then the more subtle I get into it, it's like, oh, there's kind of three ranges on the clarinet, like the low range and the shallow, it's the lowest range. And then there's a middle range and the highest range. And the middle range is like weirdly the weakest. So it's like, oh, if I want a strong statement, I shouldn't put it there on the clarinet. I should either bring it up or bring it down or give it to another instrument. And the middle range is for sort of accompaniment. Anyway, so like getting further, that's just an example of like getting further down on this path, and you have all these options that depending on what kind of idea you're trying to express, you can like grab those different tools. Yeah.
So
Awesome.
Yeah.
Then, if I'm correct, Jordan is next.
Yeah. So I'm curious about influences, specifically direct influences that you wanted to explore in a way that you maybe influences that overlap with Falls, but also things that like you're like, I'm free to follow this. One thing that, and you can confirm or deny this, but the sort of beginning of Citadels in Ruin from your record feels like very like Eld or Blodhem or Mardrum era Enslaved. So like that second Enslaved period. So was that intentional? Were you just like, let's just go for it? And are there other examples of sort of like, let's just go for it with nods to certain artists?
Yeah. I don't have too many off the top of my head, like direct nods, but there are some. And yeah, I would say the Citadels in Ruin, that first riff, interesting you say Enslaved. I guess they're directly related, but what I had in mind for that was Bathory.
Oh, okay.
Just like that sort of like doomy heavy metal
Yeah.
vibe. But obviously Enslaved very influenced by Bathory, so it's
Right.
not a leap. And Enslaved is just an influence in general, so I'm sure that kind of it's there somewhere. So yeah, that was definitely a Bathory nod. There's quite a few like Celtic Frost nods just in some of like, it's not a super fast record. There's some sections that are fast, but overall it's pretty mid-paced, sometimes slow. So that's kind of like a Celtic Frost thing, just sort of like stompy power chord riffs and trills and just kind of that sort of like primitive metal vibe. So that shows up in a lot of songs. Satyricon is a big one. I think the fourth track, Howl of Gleaming Swords, it's kind of the closest to an atmospheric black metal song in a way, some of the parts, but there's a couple sections. There's one section in particular that has this almost like medieval Satyricon sort of melody, with a galloping picking pattern. And I think the overall arrangement and sound it might not be super obvious, but definitely a Satyricon, a directly influenced by Satyricon part. Yeah, I mean, those are kind of like the big metal influences, the most obvious ones for the record. There's some stuff that is like outside of metal that only barely influenced it, but like krautrock stuff, which I kind of referenced for when I was doing synths, which aren't super loud. They're kind of buried, but I was just trying to listen to how like Popol Vuh and Can and Cluster, like bands like that, kind of like what they do with synths. And they get a lot weirder. I dialed it back because, I mean, trying to keep it within, especially for that record, I was trying to keep it within like the metal vocabulary as much as possible. More so than Falls does. Just trying to be responsible in that way.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the music I'll write going forward, I think will be less locked into the metal vocabulary. More krautrock.
I was
Nice.
just laughing because it's interesting that it's kind of a genre, because krautrock never was a genre, but a genre which was done 50 years ago by some wheat heads in Germany that weren't even successful in Germany.
Yeah.
Is so damn influential, because I would say that every fifth, sixth interview we do, that term is dropped.
Yeah.
And I think it's getting more and more. Maybe it's because I listen more to it over time, because, it's fascinating to me as a German to see like how influential that really was. But I also think that it's getting referred to more over time by people outside of Germany, which is cool and strange at the same time for us. Especially when you say Can, because Can is a group that was established like 15 kilometers from my hometown.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow. Nice. Yeah, I mean, I think it's just an interesting genre because it's like, it's kind of like an offshoot of prog. It's kind of an offshoot of psychedelic rock, but it's like neither of those things. It's
Exactly.
more electronic.
Yeah.
So it's just sort of, I think for people that like weird rock music, it's, it has the adventure, like the adventurous spirit of maybe prog, but without the virtuosity. Yeah, it's just you can't really nail it down. Even like one band to the other is pretty different.
Mm-hmm.
So
even
yeah,
one band to the same band 10 years later. I mean, think of Kraftwerk.
Right.
Think of Kraftwerk and the first stuff they did, and then compare it to the model. I don't know.
Yeah,
That sounds like two different bands.
Yeah, so that spirit of exploration, without necessarily needing to be virtuosic or like perfectionist, is inspiring for me.
Yeah. Or as
and
a
I think
friend
there's
of mine
natural overlap. Oh, go ahead.
You go ahead, Jordan.
I was just going to say, I think there's a natural overlap between that approach and black metal too, especially more atmospheric black metal, because it's like, I don't know, you put the record on and it's sort of like a wall of sound that more or less stays at that level and that timbre for the whole record. And yeah, that's what I think of when I think of krautrock too. It's just like freakouts, or whatever, but you're kind of like, it's this droning. Yeah, depending on the band.
Or as a friend of mine a few years ago described it as, the level of I don't give a fuckness is just high on those guys.
Yeah, it's true.
No commercial ambitions.
Right.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. True. Totally true. Totally true.
Just making art, pretty much, you know.
And in
Jordan,
that sense, it's like the opposite of prog in some ways.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
So if I counted it correctly, Jordan is next.
Okay, nice. Oh, I actually just asked the enslaved question, but
yeah, I forgot.
I can ask another one.
I forgot to keep my tab. Then I have one for you both. I mean,
Nice.
like we now have Forêt Endormie, we have Rhûn, we have Falls of Rauros, and I'm very sure I've forgotten others. Could you guys imagine doing a show with 2 or more of your own projects?
We've kind of done that.
Yeah.
Well, with Forêt and Falls.
Yeah.
Right?
The first Forêt Endormie show was opening for Falls, so that was a good one. And then we've only done it once since then when we played Shadowwoods. It's like a small metal festival in Maryland that doesn't happen anymore, but Forêt and Falls played the same day. So that's kind of like that. And Falls and Panopticon, you know, that we do that sometimes. We're going to do it again. So, yeah.
Oh, you're going to bring this to Europe?
Well, at least for Fortress Festival.
I thought one would be falling for it and say like, of course, it's September or something like that. Oh.
Time will tell.
Time will tell.
But we've done it before and we're doing it at Fortress Fest for sure. So I think we're playing the same day. I actually don't know at Fortress Fest.
Yeah, we are.
Okay.
But Jordan, Van, or also both of you, could you imagine like doing a free project? I don't want to say festival, but gig, you know, like maybe with Forêt of opening and then Rhûn going next and Falls going last? Could you imagine doing that, or do you then say physical stress is too high?
I could see it being stressful. At the very least, each of us would only have to do 2 sets, unless Jordan was involved. I mean, the thing with Rhûn is there are no plans for live shows. It's very much a studio project. Yeah, up to this point. I'm not going to say 100% never, but there's definitely no plans for it. So I wouldn't know who would even be in the lineup, because how it can even be reproduced live, because a lot of it I'm just kind of making experimentally. I would have to like purchase equipment to recreate some of those sounds live. It would be a whole thing. I won't say never, but it's not in my plans. But yeah, doing 3 bands back to back, I mean, that'd be pretty intense, demanding.
Yeah. I was just going to say, similarly, it's just a lot of music to have under your fingers and in your like ready to make sound. It's definitely need to do Forêt. I mean, it would never commercially make sense to have Forêt play after Falls anyway, but need to do that first because it's all like clean singing, and after a Falls set, my throat is like it's not ready to sing. It's pretty thrashed. So there's that. Yeah. But mostly it's just having all the music ready to go, because at least for me, both bands' music is pretty challenging, so it takes a lot of preparation. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess it's also well already logistically. I mean, like Forêt is how many people at the moment? 5 or more?
We're 5. Yep. We're gonna do some shows with Ray, so the drummer we keep talking about, because he played on the record a little bit too. So we're gonna play as a 6-piece in May. But yeah, 5 official members. Yep.
Yeah, and then think about the logistics. Of course, if you open with Forêt, you got to get, sorry to say it, like you got to get the whole stuff off stage, and then everything that is already challenging, right? You have to have a crew with more than 1 or 2 people for that. Yes. Although I have to say, no pressure and no pushing. Although I have to say, like that combination is of course highly interesting. For every black metal fan with at least one open ear, I think that is something that we would all like to hear or see at one point or another. Anyway, Aaron,
Cool.
Your next question.
All right. Yeah. So what do you, in contrast to Falls, where we write as a group, what do you enjoy or what do you not enjoy about writing, about being solely responsible to write something completely from top to bottom, all the arrangements? I mean, is that enjoyable for you or not?
Yeah, I mean, it's enjoyable in some ways. In some ways I can move really quickly. If I decide that I have a deadline, then I can schedule myself to write as quickly as possible. Whereas when you're working with other people, you kind of can't say, it's not as, there's just more people to wrangle. So I can work really quickly. I can make all the decisions. I don't have to communicate with anyone, which can take time. And I don't have to like negotiate style or really any choices with anyone. But with that brings on a lot of pressure, because it's like, does this even sound good? I have no idea anymore. Or is this totally bonkers? Like I'm primarily writing for myself, obviously. Like it'd be crazy not to with music like that. That doesn't really have commercial, like I'm not raking in the money with it, and I don't expect to. So if I was writing it for that would be kind of depressing. But so I write it for myself, but also like when you release music, you hope that some people will connect with it, right? So I have those moments where I'm like, man, what is this? A joke in the studio. So we recorded the last 2 records with Colin Marston. And a joke that I have with our piano player is like, we're listening back to mixes and, some weird shit's happening. And it's like, who is this for? And we're just like laughing, like who's the audience for this music? So there's like all of those questions, and sometimes it's funny and sometimes it's like pretty stressful. Whereas with Falls, we give each other a lot of feedback, and I trust the 3 of you like to keep us on track, and on track by that I mean stylistically, like it will be good, and quality, it will be good. So yeah. And then as far as the actual like physical writing of the music, so my full-time job, I work in sound design and music for video games, which is cool. But that physically feels very similar to writing music in a DAW or like writing music in notation. I'm in the same chair in the same room. And it starts to feel like, oh man. Whereas with Falls, a lot of times we're in a room together with instruments, like actually playing with no screen, which is refreshing. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a very different,
lots of different pieces.
Different experience writing in front of a computer.
Yeah,
definitely.
Which I like. I really like it in general. It just, with my work, it's tough. Like just as humans, we have a limit for how long we want to do any one thing. like want to go outside, want to like talk to people. So that's been a challenge lately. But yeah.
Yeah.
One question attached to that for both of you. I mean, like you're both the songwriter in each project. Is that also something that you know, in some ways, is important for your own well-being? You know, like to once in a while have something where you are the sole person. You know, like I don't want to say the dictator, but you know, like the guy who's responsible for all of it. You know, like where you could say, okay, this is 100% my baby.
For me, I'm not sure if that's the important part.
No, not the important part, but one
It's just-
part of it, one part of the allure.
yeah, I mean, it must have some allure. I mean, I think for me, it's mostly just the ability, kind of as Jordan said, like to be able to work quickly, like at my own pace as
Mhm.
ideas come to me, and I don't have to get like any sort of approval or um compromise to make sure everyone's, you know, into the, because you know we have to all agree on what we're doing with falls. We have to all be into it, or we won't go forward with an idea. And it's nice to be able to just get ideas out, and there's no one to like approve those ideas. But as Jordan also said, that can be you can go down the path where you're not sure if it's even good, because there's no feedback from anyone. And I could solicit feedback, but I feel self-conscious about sharing unfinished ideas, so I don't. But yeah, I'd say overall it does satisfy a slightly different um, sort of like creative urge to just do something yourself.
Mm.
But I like working in a band more overall.
Of course.
Yeah, and for me, yeah, there is something to it. Like I've realized over the years that Falls has something pretty unique in that we're all childhood friends. We've been doing it for almost 20 years, and we're all willing to sort of like increase the amount of time that we put into it or decrease it based on all of our needs. So most of the reasons that bands break up, I think we're sort of safe from, which is awesome. It's like amazing actually. Um, but there is something to the idea that like I have a project that as long as I want to do it, I will keep doing it with whatever musicians still want to do it. So I've been lucky to play with a lot of really great musicians. And if someone leaves, like it's okay. I mean, it's sad, but it's like there are other people to play with. And because I write music on notation, it's like any really trained musician can sort of step in. So that feels good. But also, like Aaron said, love playing in a band. So like I really like that it's a stable lineup with Forêt Endormie, so that it's like the friends getting together and like evolving together and all that stuff. And like that's the more fun part is when you're done writing and you give parts to people and you're actually collaborating with human beings in a room together instead of sending emails and writing a notation. But yeah, it is nice to have something that's like that's I decide if it happens or not. Yeah.
And then Jordan, we would have your last question.
Cool. So very similar to Aaron's last question, I was going to ask what are some ways that working on Rhûn stuff is easier or more relaxing or faster? What ways are it more challenging? It sounds like you already answered that question. So you can elaborate on that, or I'll throw you another one. I noticed
Oh, the other
listening
one.
to the. Okay. I noticed listening to the Rhûn record that you seem to experiment with vocal techniques and timbres and sounds and effects a bit more than we usually do with falls. So like some whispering, some crazy spatial effects. So yeah, if you could talk about like how you made those decisions, were they, did you agonize over them? Did you sort of set it and forget it? What was that process like?
I definitely did not agonize over any of that. It was pretty much, I did the vocals really quickly, so that it was mostly instinctual. Like I had lyrics written out. But as far as the delivery, because I wasn't doing it in a studio, I was just doing it by myself. I could just kind of quickly do takes. So I would just record a few takes of each section and just literally just go for whatever vibe I want. Sometimes I would do some like manic sounding vocals or something just a bit more, something that you wouldn't hear in falls. So yeah, basically just off the cuff decisions. And I wanted them to be a little more varied. So that was at least intentional. But as far as like the spatial effects and some of that experimental stuff, that was just all when I was mixing it. So and same with guitar effects and stuff. A lot of it was just quick decision making while working. I was just like, it would be badass if there is a like 20-second reverb tail on this scream. Let me just do it. Like things like that. That when we're recording in a studio with an engineer, you have to kind of plan all those and like request these things and these in different parts where I could just kind of quickly try it. And if I thought it sounded cool, I just kept it. So yeah, doing the production myself let me experiment without like wasting somebody's time with bad ideas, or just over the top ideas. I could audition it myself and then decide if it's good without having to communicate back and forth about it. So it opened a lot of those doors. But yeah, I was not agonizing over it. It was kind of I just had a reaction test. If I thought it sounded cool or badass or evil or whatever like the like macro vibe I was going for, then I just kept it and moved on. It was fun.
Nice. Yeah.
It's funny how clear you guys can talk about stuff that sometimes in the case of Rhûn might not be observable at first, or in the case of Forêt, it's Forêt, of course, at some point for the untrained listener is a little more accessible, but at the same time, I think it's much more complex than people think. And I like the way that both of you describe those things, which, as I said, can be very, very technical, and at the same time, for you, seemingly very, very easy. So, guys, first of all, thanks for all the questions. If anybody still wants to know a little bit more about the Rhûn record, about the new Forêt Endormie record, just check out below this video on our website, not on YouTube, on our website, you will find the reviews for both records. However, if you like that, then just check out our website. But for you two, of course, I cannot let you go without testing you or sending you for the infamous quickfire round. You will always get two alternatives and have to choose one of them and give a short explanation. And I'll start with, for me, at the moment, one of the most interesting black metal scenes. And it's not the US, it's not in Europe, it's in Quebec. I think Quebec at the moment has a very, very mighty black metal scene. And I'll give you two bands from that region and you'll have to choose. Giver versus Nordic Winter.
I barely know either band. I know Giver, they work with Eisenwald, so I've heard them a little
Yes.
bit. So I would have to choose them because I don't think I've heard Nordic Winter.
I've never heard either band, unfortunately. So I'll go the same as Aaron, I guess. I trust his aesthetic taste.
I love both bands, but I have to say that the last Giver record, Destin Messiah, not Messianic, that was one of my highlights a couple of years ago. It was one of the best records of the year, and it came out very, very late, and it elbowed its way into the top 10 very, very quickly. It's a really amazing record. And yes, they're on Eisenwald. A little shout out to our friends over in Gotha. Yes, amazing record label and a very, very good band. And the new record, which is coming up in a few weeks, is amazing as well. So for every black metal fan, you gotta check out Giver very, very soon. And if you want to know more about Giver, you should check back in a few weeks because we're gonna have an interview with them as well. So we're gonna keep you busy.
Nice.
You guys, we have spoken about your connections to Panopticon a little bit. I'll have two questions related to Austin's project. First of all, you'll get two records to choose from. Kentucky versus Scars of Man on the Once Nameless Wilderness, both parts.
Scars.
Kentucky. Yeah.
That's good. That
Wait,
is
do you want
very
an
good because
explanation
that
also?
way... What did you say?
Did you want an explanation for each of these, or can we just?
No, you don't have to give an explanation because you work with him. So maybe Jordan can explain why he chooses Kentucky.
Yeah, for me, I mean, both records are great. Everything that Austin does is great. But Kentucky is like, for me, super nostalgic, which I think it influences a lot of people's opinions. But yeah, I remember when it came out, it was kind of like it was really cool watching Austin get a little bit deeper into his like folk side on that record. And then also it was really cool seeing people respond to it in a way that I think that was like his sort of the beginning of people really understanding how good Panopticon is, which was really cool to see. And also the record is great. Like the music on it is great. So that's why I went with that one.
And both you, Falls of Rauros, as well as Panopticon, have done loads of splits and collaboration records with other people. So I'll give you two that Austin has worked on. Waldgeflüster versus, and I'm not sure how to pronounce it, Nechotwen.
I'd go with the Nichachwin split. That's a tough one, though. That's a toss-up.
Would it have been easier if it had been Nichachwin versus Aerial Ruin?
No.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like
it's also tough because we know all these people in the other band, so I feel like I'm choosing which band I like more than another band, and they're all our friends. It's
right.
I know, but
it's
think
tough.
of it like, which record do you want to listen to more right now? And if you then say a church one, that's totally fine. It's totally fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure you know none of the people in the next two bands. You've been speaking about a certain love for krautrock. So Harmonia versus Cluster.
It's a tough one.
I never said these would be easy.
I would probably go Cluster, but I don't really know if I back up that. I don't think I could 100% say for sure. But
it's very
Cluster,
often just a matter of feeling, right?
Yeah, my mood on the given day, but yeah, Cluster and the work they did with Brian Eno, I love that stuff. Yeah, that's my answer.
Yeah, I'm not krautrock educated enough to make a decision here. Do I have to make one anyway? It'll be
No,
meaningless.
your bandmate got you
Okay.
out of that one.
Sorry, everyone. Thanks, Aaron.
You're welcome.
Let's throw in a few pop cultural things. Falls of Rauros. If nobody has looked it up yet, but there is a certain literary hint in the name of it. So you'll get Frodo versus Bilbo.
I go Frodo.
Same, yeah.
Yeah.
Why?
A lot of people hate Frodo.
No.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. A lot of people seem to. I mean, just The Hobbit's a great fun book, but it's more of a children's book. It's like less developed. I mean, you get way more emotional depth and like hardship just associated with Lord of the Rings. It's a much longer and darker book, so more time to connect with the character.
You guys are from Maine, as you've already mentioned. So if anybody asks me what is the first author that comes to your mind from Maine, easy, Stephen King, of course. So once in a while, I'll give you 3 alternatives to choose from. Salem's Lot, Pet Sematary, or It. Which is the better book? Not movie, book.
I haven't read any of them, so I don't know. Yeah.
Let me guess, but you've seen 1 or 2 of the movies, right?
Yeah. I mean, sure. I guess there's something really charming about the like original made for TV It film. I think I would choose that. But yeah, I've only read a couple Stephen King books, and they're some of the lesser known ones. So yeah.
I'm in a similar boat. I've barely read Stephen King. I did read Pet Sematary when I was a kid. So I guess I would pick that because I've actually read it. But interestingly enough, I mean, I barely dig into the Stephen King world, even though he is from here.
It's funny, I always like to tell that story, and for people out there who might have already heard it, I have a nice connection to Pet Sematary. When I was in teacher training nearly 20 years ago, I had somebody teaching us in English, like how to educate children in English. And I was doing a lesson that he was sitting in, and it was on a book called Speed Queen. And in that book, there is a fictitious death row murderer, and during her last hours of life, she is doing a vocal recording of her life for Stephen King, and she's also often addressing King. And so I typed up that whole thing, and of course, in the book, she refers to King's Pet Sematary. And my English trainer, he was like, "Oh, you made a huge mistake. Cemetery is completely falsely written." And he was angry as fuck. And I hated the guy from the bottom of my heart. So I was like, I bet you 200 euros that I got it right, because it's named after the 1975 record by the Ramones. Because the Ramones took the name from Stephen King, so it's 100% correctly. No, it's right. King took it from Ramones, and he was like, "No, it cannot be true." So we walk into the teacher's lounge, type it into Google, and it was like Pet Sematary, Stephen King, reference to the 1975 record by the Ramones, and I was like,
wow.
And for a month, that was the last thing I spoke to him.
Well,
was it the spelling of cemetery that he had an issue with?
Yeah, because of course,
like the misspelling.
CEMETI and SEMATARI, right? With Ramones, and he was like, "Oh."
Yeah, that's good.
In
Did he ever
moment
pay
of
you?
glory.
Did he ever pay you?
Yes, he did.
No.
On the spot.
Oh wow! Oh my God!
Yeah, because we
Wow,
were in the
okay.
teacher's lounge. There were like 15 people around us, you know. If he
Nice.
hadn't
Pressure,
paid on
yeah,
the spot,
pressure's
so
on.
I would be like, everybody, just so you know, that guy is a cheat. So we had to pay on the
Nice.
spot.
Perfect.
So, I got a few more. I'm not sure whether you've watched either of them, but I mean, like, of course, there are lots of fantasy epic books over the last couple of decades. And many of them have also been turned into TV shows. So I'll give you two of those TV shows. Game of Thrones versus Wheel of Time.
Oh, I have a lot to say about this, but I'll try to keep it short. I would actually choose Wheel of Time at this point. Yeah, I think it's great. And well, it has the benefit of not being finished, which is what ruined Game of Thrones for me. So
Yes.
I'll just stop there. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. Aaron?
Yeah.
That seems to be, yeah, a lot of people have issue with Game of Thrones because of how it ends. I am completely in the dark on both of these. I will be honest. I have never read or seen either show or book. I've seen one episode of Game of Thrones. I think it was the season finale of the first season. Just because
Weird.
I was just with some friends that were watching it once. So yeah, I am in. Like, it's one of those things I never watched it. Everyone was raving about it, and then everyone started shitting on it as it got worse. And I was like, well, now I
Right.
don't feel very motivated to watch it. I guess if everyone was just like masterpiece start to finish, maybe I would have decided to watch it. But now I just don't feel the need.
I will
could
say
read
one
it, I
thing
guess.
about Game of Thrones. First of all, interestingly, here your bandmate bailed you out, Aaron.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I still
thank
say
you.
the first
Yeah.
5 seasons of Game of Thrones are near to perfection. But everything afterwards just ruined it.
Yeah, I would say first 4, and then season 5 you start seeing some cracks in the whatever. But I enjoyed most of it, but yeah, you get to the end and you're like, wow.
Shit.
Yeah, damn.
Let's
Really?
not go, but let's talk about the
Yeah, that's
important
not.
thing in
Yeah, you're
life.
right. You're right.
Music.
I've been here too many times.
I'll give you 2 Swiss black metal bands. And to me, the 2 most important Swiss black metal bands ever. Celtic Frost versus Paysage d'Hiver.
Wow. That's a tough one for me.
Yeah, it's a weird pair
Very
up.
different.
Yeah.
Very different bands.
Yeah, it's
But
just because I
if
play black metal from Switzerland. I had to find a connection.
Yeah. I don't want to snub anyone, but if I was to pick a band to listen to right now, it'd be Paysage d'Hiver. Just love they're great. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like 50-50 on this. They're like, they satisfy like the opposite ends of
They do.
the spectrum. I mean, Celtic Frost being barely black metal. I mean, clearly adjacent in like informed black metal, but you know, when I listen to them, I'm thinking of more just like dirty heavy metal, or like, I mean, I don't even know, just like in Paysage d'Hiver is just extremely black metal, like, you know, so lo-fi, it's almost ambient music. Like, it's really just, it's so far down the black path that it's barely metal, you know, anymore. But yeah, I probably listen to Paysage more often these days, just because they have more albums that I think are great, whereas Celtic Frost, it's kind of like you know, I don't love every Celtic Frost album. It's just a few of them.
Okay.
So yeah, I listen to Paysage more these days.
Hard one, but quick one, guys. No explanation, because we will piss off a lot of people with this one. Enslaved versus Bathory.
That's tough.
Not for me. While you are thinking, I can say that there is hardly a band that I would pick over Bathory. So for me, that's easy. It's always Bathory.
That's my instinct. My instinct is Bathory. But Enslaved have a very long career, a longer career.
Don't blame the guy, he's dead.
Yeah, for me, it's
yeah.
you said no explanation. I mean,
Oh,
obviously love both bands. I think both of us love both bands. Have been listening to them for a couple decades at this point. But
right now,
I feel what right now. If I could listen to one band right now, it probably would be Bathory. Actually, it's been a while. So yeah, is that true? I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Aaron,
Bathory.
now you had a lot of time to think.
Bathory is my answer.
And then an offshoot,
explanation.
because we've been talking about, you know, the proximity of Maine and New York, and you know, somewhere being in the middle of it, and also about hardcore roots and stuff like that. I'll give you two New York / Long Island hardcore or emo core bands that a lot of people, including myself, loved back in the day. Taking Back Sunday versus On the Might of Princess.
I've never even heard of the second band.
You should.
So I guess Taking Back Sunday. Okay.
Okay.
I feel like Taking Back Sunday I never quite got into, even though I was listening to similar bands at the time, like Thursday and Glassjaw. But yeah, I'd still pick them, I guess. Since I've heard them.
I'm in a similar boat. I've heard of On the Might of Princes. I don't think I've ever actually heard a note of their music. And yeah, also similarly, I was never really into Taking Back Sunday. Like when they were blowing up, definitely was into Glassjaw, stuff like that. They're just like a little bit gnarlier. So I guess I'll pick them because I've heard them, but I wouldn't say I've ever been a fan. Yeah.
So first of all, guys, thanks for all your time. Thanks for all the insight, and also for doing this, which I know is always difficult, you know, coming up with questions that you want to ask friends, also coming up with questions that not only you are interested in because it's like nerdy stuff, but also stuff that everybody could be interested in. So thanks for doing this. For everybody out there, as I said, on our website, you will have a review for both records. So check that out, please. Check out both records, because Rhûn's as well as Forêt Endormie's records are amazing. They're very, very different, but if you go at it with a very open ear, you will find things on both records that you will like. I'm very, very, very sure. For you guys, enjoy the rest of your day, and thanks for doing this.
Yeah, thanks. This has been fun.
Absolutely.
We appreciate it.
Yeah.
So, bye-bye, folks.